The galaxy had existed for billions of years before humans even learned to make fire. Ancient civilizations had risen, conquered star systems, built empires that stretched across thousands of worlds, and some had fallen into dust long before Earth's dinosaurs walked. The Galactic Imperium was the oldest and most powerful of these civilizations. They controlled over 40,000 star systems. Their technology was beyond anything humanity could understand. Their warships could crack planets in half. Their soldiers lived for centuries. They had seen countless species rise from their homeworlds, reach for the stars, and either submit to Imperial rule or face complete destruction. When their long-range sensors first detected human radio signals coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, the Imperium sent a survey vessel to investigate. The ship arrived in Earth's orbit in the year 2247, just 50 years after humanity had established its first colony on Mars. The survey team spent 6 months studying humanity from the shadows. They watched human cities, their primitive spacecraft, their weapons, their art, and their history. When the survey report reached the Imperial Council, the High Lords laughed. "These creatures have barely left their own planet," said High Lord Varath, his purple skin shimmering under the council chamber's lights. "They fight among themselves over patches of dirt. Their lifespans are laughably short. Their bodies are weak. They possess no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They are perhaps the most pathetic species we have ever encountered." The council agreed without debate. Humanity was classified as a level 0 civilization, the lowest possible ranking. They were deemed so insignificant that the Imperium decided not to waste resources on formal conquest. Instead, they sent a single diplomatic vessel to deliver humanity's options. Submit and become a servant species, providing labor for Imperial projects. Or refuse and be forgotten, left to eventually destroy themselves as so many primitive species did. Ambassador Keller, a tall being with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like hot coals, arrived at Earth's orbital station with this message. He met with representatives from the United Earth government and delivered the Imperium's terms with barely concealed contempt. The humans listened quietly. They asked questions. They took notes. Then their lead representative, a woman named Admiral Sarah Chun, smiled in a way that made Keller feel something he had not experienced in centuries: discomfort. "We will need time to consider your offer," she said politely. "Please return in 1 Earth year for our answer." Keller granted this request, though he thought it was merely a formality. What choice did these insects have? He returned to Imperial space and filed a routine report. The matter of Earth was considered closed. 1 year later, Ambassador Keller returned with a small escort fleet of 3 warships. It was more than enough firepower to gloss the planet if the humans had somehow developed foolish ideas about resistance. But as his ships emerged from faster-than-light travel near Earth, Keller's confident expression changed to confusion, then shock, and finally something close to fear. The space around Earth was filled with warships. Human warships, hundreds of them. They were crewed by Imperial standards, built with rough edges and visible seams. But they were there, floating in neat formations, their weapons powered and ready. More ships were emerging from massive orbital shipyards that had definitely not existed 1 year ago. "Impossible," Keller whispered. "They could not have built this fleet in a year." They did not have the capability. His tactical officer ran the scans 3 times to confirm. The readings were accurate. Humanity had somehow constructed over 400 warships in 12 months. Each ship was heavily armed. Each was fully crewed. Each was preparing to fight. Admiral Chun's face appeared on Keller's communication screen. She was still smiling. "Ambassador, we have considered your offer. We respectfully decline. Earth will not be submitting to Imperial rule today or any day. You may return to your masters with this message." Humanity bows to no one. Keller's escort commander wanted to attack immediately. He argued that 3 Imperial warships could easily destroy this primitive fleet. Imperial shields, Imperial weapons, Imperial training. The humans stood no chance. But Keller overruled him. Something felt wrong. Something felt very, very wrong. They retreated to report this development to the High Council. The news spread through the Imperium like wildfire. A level 0 species had refused submission. They had built a fleet. They had challenged the greatest power in the galaxy. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was impossible. It demanded a response. The Imperial Fleet Command assigned a task force of 50 warships to handle the situation. It was considered excessive. 20 ships would have been more than enough to conquer any system. But the High Lords wanted to make an example of Earth. They wanted other species to see what happened when insects dared to challenge giants. The task force arrived in Earth's solar system 8 months later. They expected to find the same primitive fleet they had seen before. Instead, they found something that made their commanding admiral stop speaking mid-sentence. The human fleet had grown. It was now over 2,000 ships strong. They filled the space around Earth like an angry swarm. And they had changed. The ships were sleeker now, their weapons more powerful, their formations more sophisticated. But most disturbing of all, the humans were not waiting defensively. They were advancing. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 31 Imperial warships had been destroyed. The remaining 19 retreated in disorder. They had killed perhaps 200 human vessels, but the humans simply did not stop coming. Every time a ship fell, another took its place. Every time a weapon system was destroyed, the humans found a way to keep fighting. They rammed Imperial vessels with crippled ships. They ejected crews in escape pods and then flew their damaged craft directly into enemy engines. They fought with a fury that the Imperium had never encountered. The survivors brought footage back to the Imperial Council. The High Lords watched in silence as human pilots flew suicide runs into the hearts of Imperial battleships. They watched human Marines board disabled vessels and fight hand-to-hand against species twice their size. They watched human captains refuse to surrender, even as their ships burned around them. High Lord Vareth was no longer laughing. "What are these creatures?" he asked quietly. "What have we awakened?" The answer came 6 months later when a human fleet appeared at the edge of Imperial space. They had somehow developed faster than light travel. They had somehow built a force capable of projecting power across hundreds of light years. They were no longer waiting to be attacked. They were bringing the war to the Imperium. The conflict that followed lasted for 3 years. It cost the Imperium more than it had lost in the previous 1,000 years combined. Human tactics were unconventional, unpredictable, and terrifyingly effective. They did not fight like any species the Imperium had encountered. They did not follow established rules of warfare. They adapted, improvised, and evolved at a pace that Imperial commanders could not match. But what truly broke the Imperium's spirit was not human technology or tactics. It was human endurance. Every species the Imperium had conquered eventually surrendered when the cost became too high. They calculated losses, weighed options, and chose survival over continued resistance. Humans did not do this. They lost worlds and kept fighting. They lost fleets and built more. They lost millions of soldiers and sent millions more. The concept of acceptable losses seemed foreign to them. Every loss only made them angrier, more determined, more dangerous. In the final battle of the war, the Imperial home fleet made its last stand above their capital world. They had gathered every remaining warship, over 1,000 vessels, to defend the seat of their ancient empire. The human fleet that arrived to meet them numbered over 10,000 ships. Admiral Chun led the attack personally. She was older now. Her hair turned gray from years of war. But her eyes still held that same smile that had unsettled Ambassador Keller all those years ago. The battle was short. Imperial commanders, faced with certain destruction, sent a surrender request within 3 hours. Chun accepted, but her terms were not gentle. The Imperium would release all servant species. The Imperium would pay reparations to every world they had conquered. The Imperium would submit to human oversight of their military forces. And the Imperium would remember, forever, what happened when they underestimated humanity. High Lord Vareth signed the surrender documents on the bridge of Admiral Chai's flagship. His hands trembled as he pressed his mark to the agreement. He looked at the human standing before him, this creature from an insignificant species on an unremarkable planet, and asked the question that had haunted him for 3 years. How? How did you do this? You were nothing. You had nothing. How did you become this? Admiral Chun considered the question for a long moment. She thought about human history. She thought about every empire that had tried to conquer humanity and failed. She thought about every challenge her species had faced and overcome. She thought about the fire that burned in the heart of every human being, the fire that refused to accept defeat, the fire that turned fear into rage and rage into power. "You made a mistake, High Lord," she said finally. "You looked at our short lives and saw weakness. But we do not live long enough to be patient. You looked at our soft bodies and saw vulnerability. But we turned that vulnerability into armor and weapons. You looked at our conflicts and saw chaos. But those conflicts taught us how to fight. Everything you saw as weakness, we turned into strength." She stepped closer to the defeated alien lord, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You called us insignificant. You dismissed us as insects. You gave us 1 year to prove ourselves, thinking we would crawl to you in submission. But we are humans. We do not crawl. We do not beg. We do not submit. When you push us, we push back harder. When you threaten our children, we burn your worlds. When you tell us something is impossible, we do it anyway just to prove you wrong." She gestured to the thousands of human warships visible through the viewport, each one representing factories built, resources gathered, and lives dedicated to this moment. "You had 10,000 years to build your empire. We matched it in 10. You conquered 40,000 worlds through fear. We defeated you with fury. And now, every species in this galaxy will know the truth. Humanity is not insignificant. Humanity is not weak. Humanity is what happens when the universe forgets that the smallest creatures often carry the sharpest teeth." High Lord Vareth bowed his head in defeat. He had nothing left to say. The Imperium had called humanity insignificant, and humanity had answered with fire. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under Imperial rule for millennia watched as the ancient empire fell. They saw the human fleets in the skies above the Imperial homeworld. They heard the terms of surrender, and they learned a lesson that would echo through history for generations to come. Never underestimate humanity. Never corner them. Never give them a reason to fight. Because when humans fight, they do not stop until they have won. And gods help anyone foolish enough to call them insignificant. The war was over. But the legend of humanity was only beginning.